Welcome to Win the Future, a podcast where we chat with folks who are tackling the most significant challenges our communities face today to make for a better tomorrow. I'm your host, Brett Broster. This is episode number 11. Hello and welcome to Win the Future. I'm your host, Brett Broster, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Jim Quish, who is the Planning and Zoning Commission board chair in Milford, Connecticut, and all-around fantastic guy, environmentalist. Welcome to the program. Jim, obviously we've been in the midst of a pandemic, and now you're doing public meetings instead of being in public over Zoom. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned from that process and what some of the challenges and opportunities are?
When we first started doing remote meetings, I was quite uncomfortable. I felt I didn't have control. I was worried that just wouldn't be seamless, wouldn't be effective. And we did have a number of issues. We had people that weren't able to get on to the meeting. I think we had one meeting that we didn't have a quorum because the link didn't work for somebody that was on the board to join the meeting, and so it was uncomfortable at first. I'm more used to it now. I had computer connectivity issues at my house, so I would do them at my office, and then we solved that problem. So I've done the last couple from my house. So that's somewhat easier, but at first it really was uncomfortable. I didn't like it, and I'm getting more used to it. I guess you just get accustomed to it, and it's okay that we wait a little bit longer for a drawing to come up or a document that we can all look at together. It's funny, you're not sure if you have given everybody an opportunity from the public to speak, right? So when we're in person, or when we were in person, then people would line up or stand up and walk to the microphone. And so it was pretty obvious who wanted to talk. So now we have options where you can raise your hand digitally through the Zoom platform, or you can wave and you'll get recognized. But yeah, so, I kind of had a feeling that it would be over by now, and it looks to me like it's not. Yeah. So I think this is where we are for a while.
What advice would you have for other chairs of boards and commissions that are just jumping into running meetings via a platform like Zoom?
I don't know that I know that much to be able to give advice, but I think that what worked for me initially was to not have any responsibility for the electronics, right? I just had what I had in front of me. I think if I was fumbling around screen sharing and finding, glitches that I had to address in the moment, it would be more difficult to focus on the substantive issues of the application. Having done it more and more, maybe I would ease into having control and allowing the applicant to share screens or to share screens myself. Right now we have our board secretary, David Soltis, do that. It's probably best that, at least initially, it was definitely better to have someone else handle the electronic part of it and connectivity part of it, so I could focus on the public and the other board members.
And in terms of the public, with a contentious issue specifically, let's say it's electronic billboards, for example, I know that dealing with ensuring people have their voice heard versus making sure the meeting runs smoothly is difficult. What are some of the mechanisms you found that are helpful in handling that?
Yeah, that particular meeting was complicated. It was complicated for this reason. It was a meeting that was a public hearing, and it was left open, but it was left open with specific issues that it was open for, right? So it was the safety issues and distraction, right? So we had some information that was incomplete regarding other areas that had digital billboards and then changed their regulations to not allow digital billboards. And we wanted to find out whether that was because of safety issues. And we left the meeting open, but specifically only to address safety issues. And what actually happened was there were a lot of speakers on both sides of the issue, and a lot of them didn't stick to that, although it was in the initial instructions, and those instructions were given more than once, and they were disregarded, and so that to me was very frustrating. I don't know if it was visible on the Zoom meeting or in the recording, but I was very frustrated and disturbed by it.
You actually didn't show it. It was extremely frustrating, though. Sitting on that board, it was very...
You were there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you handled it with grace.
Yeah, that was actually the only the only time where I really felt there was disruption, from what we were supposedly doing, right? We were addressing one issue and one issue only. And so that makes me think about whether or not in the future, if we keep a public hearing open, do we try to limit it, or do we just, if it's going to be open, it's open. That way we don't have the dissonance with people disregarding the format that we were supposed to follow.
In that same vein, what would you recommend to folks in that public place of looking to comment on projects? What would be most helpful to get their message across?
I think it's their right. So it's up to them. I think that if you plan out what you're going to say, and a lot of people do, people bring up written notes and facts and figures and research, and that's great. And there are a lot of active people that I've seen in the years that I've been involved, and I think that's great. I find it difficult to sit through when people are mean-spirited and attack, and it's really not personal, or it shouldn't be. I mean, I guess again, it's their voice and they get to do what they want. I mean, I think that it embarrasses them if they come out and attack either developers or individuals personally. But it's up to them, So for me, I would give them all the leeway that I can, as long as they have to address the commission, not the applicant. I won't really sit through any attack on an applicant or any member or the board in general. That's something that I will do my best to shut down immediately. Other than that, it's up to them. It's their feeling. It's their 3 minutes.
Should folks look to submit more in writing in a time like this where it is difficult to navigate, or is it still probably primarily showing up to the meeting and speaking directly?
I think that even if you submit something in writing, I think you show up and let your voice be heard. You can show your face or not, and even if you pretty much say what you wrote, this way it puts the personality into it. So I think that that's valuable, and I think that has more impact. It could be the case that a board member may read some, a letter or a petition several days before the meeting, and it may be less impactful and more impactful if you augment that with personal appearance.
So Jim, let's talk a little bit about affordable housing. I know it's been a point of contention in Milford. How do you feel about the future of housing growth in the city?
Well, we did have a plan of conservation and development meeting a couple weeks ago where reviewed a document that was prepared for the city. I think it was a grant, and it was a housing analysis. I think we have to do that every 5 years, and it is not spearheaded by the P&Z. It is something that the Economic Development Office is tasked with doing. So they hired someone. So we reviewed the information that the consultant provided and the report that they submitted, and It talks about how Milford does need more housing. It starts out with a recap of what housing we actually have. And so the report says that we do need more housing, and we do need affordable housing. We have a state law, 830-G, or 8-30G, I forget exactly. But anyway, it is a state law that was crafted to make sure that municipalities have sufficient affordable housing. And the way they did that was they said that if a developer would put 30% of the housing stock that they're proposing to develop and designate that as deed restricted affordable housing, then they could skirt local zoning regulations. And what that did to Milford was it allowed for these multi-unit developments in single-family neighborhoods, which I was very much against. Not against affordable housing, but I am against the manifestation of or what actually happened in response to that regulation. Now we are in a moratorium, and we are tasked with creating a blueprint to provide that 10% affordability. Now, what the state law says is that it has to be deed restricted affordable housing, and it has to be new housing created after the enactment of that legislation. We have a number of federal housing properties here in Milford that are not calculated. So if those were calculated, we'd be closer to the 10% number one. And number two, we have a stock of rental houses and apartments that are very close to that affordability number, right? Which is 80% of the mean, and I think 27% to go towards housing, the mean income. That being said, we do have both a responsibility and an opportunity to craft what that affordability and craft where and how we want to achieve that 10%. And so that becomes an opportunity to do it sort of our way, as opposed to just letting developers buy up an acre of land and put 12 or 14 apartments on it. So that's something that we are looking at, and we'll need partnership with the mayor's office and the board of aldermen to get it done. But I look at it as an opportunity to actually get it right and make it spectacular. Make it achieve what we want, but have it be part of what we want to see Milford look like.
Well, Jim, we just need to take a quick break for commercials, and we will be back for the second part of the interview with Jim Quish. Win the Future is sponsored in part by Connecticut by the Numbers. And we're back with the second part of the interview with good friend Jim Quish, who is chair of the Milford Planning and Zoning Board. And I know we've talked about downtown in the new development coming online and with the apartments. We've talked about housing in general, but what about with commercial properties in downtowns across Connecticut and across the country are going to be struggling a good amount in the wake of the pandemic? What would you like to see in downtown Milford? Or what are some of the things that are being discussed?
The development in downtown Milford will be driven by the developers, not by the board. We can and are looking at the MCDD, Milford Center Design District, and considering what we can put in place either through the Plan of Conservation Development or on the Regulations Subcommittee to encourage more development specific to what Milford would like. I mean, if we were going to try to change a zone, that would be a public hearing, and that would be something the public would be invited and encouraged to come in and discuss. Downtown Milford, I think what is not going to change too drastically, it's a nice mix of offices and restaurants and housing. We have I think the more restaurants we have downtown will bring more people downtown, and that would in turn support the various shops and retail businesses. So, I think it's like the rising tide rises all boats. So the more we encourage development there, then I think it just helps everybody. And I think we have a big change coming up. We have 2 mixed-use developments that are in queue, and that will change downtown Milford. The look is not going to change much, but I think it'll be a little bit more vibrant.
What do you see as kind of the future of the public transit component versus the individual drivers? And I mean that in the context of parking is continually brought up, whether or not it's perception or reality. Within the context of public transit kind of losing its steam a bit, what do you see as the future of that piece playing into?
I think the disruption in public transportation, I don't think that's a forever thing. I think we're going to probably reimagine how close people sit together. And I think that similar to what the airline industry is doing, they're improving air handling systems with better filtration. And I think that if you are doing long-term planning, I don't think you discount the ability of people to get in and out of Milford on the train. It could be that there's more cars on a particular train, and so then some more distancing on each car. But I do think that I don't think it's time to discount that, and I still would plan for that being a driver for both getting in and out of town.
So Jim, let's talk a little more personal. I know that you are a painter, and I've seen some of your work. It's great. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into that?
Well, I don't know that I'm really a painter, but I do play with watercolors a little bit, and I had my grandmother and my great aunt and my aunt were all avid watercolor painters, and I painted with them as a teenager, and recently decided to get back into it. So the last year or so, I've had some paper and some paints, and start getting back after it.
Nice. I feel like that's not only great to do overall. Churchill was a painter, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I feel like there are kind of mindfulness components to painting that provide not only an outlet overall, but specifically during the pandemic. Have you found that you paint more?
No, unfortunately less. I had a couple buddies that we would paint a couple times a month, and since the pandemic, we've not done that. And so I do occasionally get a sketch pad out, but I haven't brought the paints out at home, and I don't go to the office as much as where I normally would paint. And I just haven't done it. Yeah, I don't know why. Just
no.
Different. Yeah, it's just different stuff. Also, during the nice weather, I'll go outside and I'll play my guitar. So
nice.
Sort of in the winter, where I'm inside, I'll maybe pick it up. But the nice weather, I'll go outside, and that'll be my creative outlet.
Oh, that's great. So how long have you been playing the guitar?
Long time. Yeah.
Who are the people that you like most as guitar musicians? Like, who are the people your go-tos?
I'm a big fan of Doc Watson. I like Leo Kottke, the finger picking stuff. I've always been an old blues fan, and so a lot of those, Willie McTell and Robert Johnson and Reverend Gary Davis is always kind of one of my favorite guys. But and I like Tony Rice and bluegrass. They're a little quicker than I can play, but it's solo guitar stuff. I never was in a band or anything, but just get together with buddies sometimes and play. And
that's great. I had a guitar once, and I think I took a shot at learning how to play for about 3 weeks, and then I think I've sold that guitar since. But I have a ton of respect for being able to do that. Jim, when it comes to transit-oriented development and specifically downtown with the train station, I know there's some apartments coming online. near Broad Street and where the funeral home is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we did just approve a mixed-use development. It provides underground parking, surface parking, 77 residential units that are market rate, and I think there's about 11,000 square feet of retail. The funeral home building itself will remain as either offices on the first floor and some residential use on the second floor, and possibly down the road there might be an application for a restaurant to use that space. But it is consistent with the trend to develop housing and retail within access to train stations. You know, it's a good development, and we had some good give and take with the developer to add some more green space and to add more parking than the original proposal. So I think it's going to be a nice project for downtown Milford.
That's great. And then when it comes to, obviously Milford has such a robust coastline, and floodplain issues come into play. Can you talk a little bit about the work that is being done or has been done on that front?
We do see a lot of site plan applications and coastal area management plans in front of our board, primarily situations where there was an existing house that was damaged by Superstorm Sandy. And what happens is that when they are rebuilt, they need to be raised up, and different flood zones have different requirements for actually the heights. But so we do see those applications. If they are compliant with the FEMA regs and with our zoning requirements, then it seems that that they get approved. It's something that we support. You know, people are spending a lot of money. These are homes that are generally right near the water, and they are, you know, that the whole 14 or 15 miles of coastline is a great tax base for the city, and it's good that we have these new homes being built in a manner they're protected from future storms.
Nice. And I know that there was recently a proposal in front of the board involving the mall, and malls have had a tough time, obviously over the last decade or so, everywhere across the country, and figuring out how to handle those properties is always a kind of a conundrum. Can you talk a little bit about the proposal that was in front of the board?
The mall owners came in front of the board and asked for a zone change, and to change specifically the language within that zone. There is the mall property, and there is the Stop and Shop, and then there is the retail development just further east that has Staples and, you know, whatever, a whole bunch of other, you know, big box stores, and then a strip mall with some smaller stores. But so that's the retail design district that was created some 40 years ago, probably. And so they wanted to change some language which would allow them to build apartments where the Sears tire store was. And we did not approve that. And it was my feeling that they came forward with a proposal that would give them, you know, income from the apartments, which is fine. You know, we do allow residential development inside that zone, but it's a 10 acre or 20 acre minimum. So they wanted to reduce that to 4 acres. My concern was that if we approve that, they could have the cash flow and really put no effort into reimagining the mall. And, you know, every mall owner and developer across the country is facing, you know, a struggle with the rise of online shopping, and then you add to that a pandemic that people are sort of staying away from retail stores en masse. So I understand that they have issues, and Milford would be a good partner with them to help come up with a master plan that benefits them as well as benefits the city. And it's our responsibility to ensure that it benefits the city of Milford, not just the developer.
And so I read somewhere where there's nearly 10,000 people who, since the pandemic hit, have changed their address to Connecticut. For folks who are looking to move, what's your pitch to move to Milford?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much a simple one. You know, you look at what your budget can get you in Greenwich, in Westport. You know, if you want to be near the coast, let's go down each town. Where do you get more bang from your buck, right? So Milford obviously has a great coastline. You know, it has some great public beaches, some great private beaches, and downtown Milford is exceptional. You know, it is iconic. We do have great access from, you know, the Merritt Parkway and the 95. You know, so we're really accessible. You know, great. We're 20 minutes from Yale and plenty of culture and activities. You know, close enough to the city to get in every day if you wanted to. We're positioned, you know, in a good spot. We have a culture and just a classic New England beauty that is unmatched.
Well, Jim, I couldn't agree more with you, and I can't thank you enough for your time. Do you have any last words you want to?
No, just thank you for having me, and this is fun.
Oh, pleasure. No, thank you so much for being on the show and for your mentorship and friendship, and I thoroughly enjoyed serving with you on the board, and hope to continue to work together.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in for Win the Future this week. Stay tuned for next week. And once again, thank you to Jim Quish for being the guest today, chair of the Milford Planning and Zoning Board. Thank you for listening to the Win the Future podcast, sponsored by the strategic communications firm, A Better Campaign. Make sure to visit our website at abettercampaign.com/win the future. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. Thank you for tuning in. Please tune in again next Thursday for another episode of Win the Future.